Ya, bisa. Belum nyala. Itu belum nyala. Ya, masuk harusnya.
Mungkin kita bisa mulai ya. Ini sudah 1:42. Profesor Maka juga sudah di sini dan saya lihat beberapa peserta online sudah ada di Zoom dan di offline sudah ada Pak WD1, Pak Jarot. Oke, kita mulai aja ya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Ya, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Professor Mark Beck from Lyon College, Arkansas, the Honorable Dean of Other Faculty of Mildan, the Honorable Vice Dean of Academic Affairs of Medina, the Honorable Vice Dean of Finance, the Honorable Vice Dean of Student Affairs, and the Honorable Jarod, Director of SKIG. And then the heads of the department, the faculty members, lecturers and students, both from UIN and other institutions, and all the participants who are attending the webinar this afternoon. I do hope everyone is in good health, and also hopefully this event is going to run successfully until it's finished. And I'd like to welcome you all to the Biweekly Forum held by the Faculty of Adult and Cultural Sciences, UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Jakarta. This forum is designed as a platform for scholars to disseminate their research, especially in humanities and cultural sciences, which is the core of the faculty itself. And I'm glad today we can get together again in this occasion. And today is the 34th series of the Biweekly Forum that we have conducted for about 2 years. And so far we have covered a plethora of topics within the scope of adult and cultural sciences, and which are in line with the research roadmap of in our faculties. And today we have a special guest from the US, Professor Beck. Professor Beck today will talk about the title is Humanities and Cultural Sciences as a bridge between reason and faith, and as the necessary foundation for democratic societies. So it's a very interesting topic, and I hope you will say that and engage in the discussion later. And as usual, our webinar is divided into 2 sections. The first one is for the presentation by the speaker, and then followed by the Q&A. So Professor Beck first will give a talk for 20 minutes or so, I think.
I thought they said 40.
40, okay, yeah, around 40. And after that, we'll move to Q&A session. And for participants, if you have any questions, feel free to type your questions in the chat box, or maybe later during the Q&A, you can raise hand and share your questions directly to Professor Beck. And throughout the webinar, we do appreciate if you could stay muted to avoid distraction during the discussion. Okay, now let me briefly read Professor Beck's CV or resume, so you get to know a little bit about her. And I just most people have the information from the Anthropology website, where she has been working with them. And so yeah, Professor Beck has been teaching in the Lyon College in Batesville, Arkansas. As a professor of philosophy, she received her master's degree and PhD in philosophy from Bryn College in Philadelphia. And then her research interest is primarily on Greek civilization, and most of her work relates to the legacy of ancient Greek civilization, in the era of globalization. So far, she has published around 60 works and 44 book chapters and journal articles, and she has published on Plato, Aristotle, and systems thinking, and then maybe what's really most relevant with the topic today, and she also talked about Greek culture and unity. And her articles have been published in journals not only in US but also abroad, including Indonesia, if you still remember. In 2017, she got an award from Sunan Kalijaga International Journal of Islamic Civilization for her paper. The title was "A Weaving Together of Global Civilization That Nurtures Justice and Peace, a Vision for Muslim Educators at Indonesia's Institution." Yeah, where she explored everything about the connection between Pancasila and philosophy. And what is more interesting about her that you need to know, she also has YouTube channel. Yeah, if you're interested in this topic, the legacy of ancient Greek civilization, you can check out her YouTube channel. It is Beck, PhD philosophy.
Actually, I renamed it. Dr. Catherine Beck, Greek philosophy.
Okay, Dr. Martha Catherine Beck, Greek philosophy. Okay. So yeah, in her YouTube channel, she has around 76 videos and around 8 playlists. And the topic is related to as I mentioned before, the legacy of ancient Greek civilization. Okay, already, without further ado, I would like Professor Martha Beck to start her explanation on how humanities and cultural sciences could become a bridge between reason and faith, and as the necessary foundation for democratic societies. For Professor Beck, the time is yours.
Thank you. I want to thank Joe and the dean and faculty of the Untitled Cultural Sciences for inviting me here. I'm here until the end of October, and I'm here to work with people writing journal articles and to talk to them about what they want to say, plus eventually to start new articles where we collaborate with each other and we give each other new ideas. So that's what I'm here for, and I'm excited to be here. So, all right. Today, we all know that all over the world, there's ink. For me, this is covering up what I wanted to say. So, no lie. Okay. I can't read my own. There's an international decline in democratic societies. We can all agree on that. There's the rise of authoritarianism. So the question is, what can the humanities disciplines contribute to saving, preserving democratic society? The goal of all education, no matter what, should be to cultivate human flourishing in individuals, in social life, in political life, and in relations between nations, right? We just want to flourish. We want to develop our capabilities. It's natural. So we have to make decisions about how to live, what laws, what institutions, all of it should be aimed at maximizing human flourishing. And whenever you want to pass a law or start an institution, that should always be your reason. Your first reason is because I think I can maximize human flourishing. Okay, all education includes values. There's no such thing as a detached observer. There's no objectivity apart from cultural context. The social sciences, so I think it's important for people to know the origin of the social sciences, the way you run into it in your scholarship. Originally, it was the study of human behavior, and the motive was to study it in order to control it. That was the goal. And then construct environments and modify behavior to mold people into being good. So the philosophy was that the psyche is a blank slate, and we can re-engineer it. We can re-engineer our humanity, and we can get rid of greed and lust and envy and pride. I think people sometimes forget that or lose track of that. Everything keeps going back to that, consciously or not. So it's very important to keep that in mind. The goal, the social sciences, a certain majority of them think that this proves moral relativism, right? It's a matter of fact that when you just study facts about human cultures, every society is different, right? You eat this, now you eat that, you dress this way and I dress that way. Does that mean all morals are relative? And so Ruth Benedict was very influential. She defined morality as a convenient term for socially approved habits. So the whole idea is condition people to adapt to their cultures so they fit in, and then that's how people flourish, is they fit into their culture. Researchers were thought of as during the Enlightenment. Now it's changed. That discipline of anthropology is re-examining itself. But you do need to know the origin. The researcher was a detached observer, right? I'm just observing. And there was no effort to try to create a flourishing society. It's just, you are tolerant, right? The best way to flourish is make sure not to judge other people and tolerate all worldviews. Correct? That was the theory. Okay, whoops. All right. All right, so, and there, okay. Then, the social engineers, I can't read my own thing. The traditional way to mold behavior, what they thought is they looked at religions and they said, in the past, this is the most powerful tool for molding behavior, right? It has all the rituals and the arts, everything's dedicated to these religions. And the social engineers rejected religion, right? Because of the religious wars in Europe, religion was used as a weapon. Religion is just a bunch of false beliefs. It's anti-science. It demands blind obedience as opposed to critical thinking. It's anti-equality. It's anti-everything that the Enlightenment stands for, right? And let's see. Karl Marx was that it's the economic system that molds people. And whenever there's religion in a society, it indicates the corruption of the society. Because it means that people are not allowed to flourish. So they have to develop this fantasy about life after death, and then they can flourish. So Marx thought of religion as the opiate of the people, the drug that keeps people from acting and changing things, okay? So again, religion is a big lie, and we gotta get rid of it, we're not making progress, okay? Then Freud went that the idea of God is just infantilism, okay? Children, when they're small, they trust their parents or their authority figures. They think their parents know everything and are all powerful. And then they realize, oh, my dad doesn't know what he's doing. And there's know everything, and there's things he can't control. So then, because of that anxiety, You invent this God who's the daddy in the sky. He knows everything, and he is in control. So again, that's a total denigration of religion. It's just invented in order to control societies, right? It's a tool of social control. So the utilitarian view, these are the really influential views in the Enlightenment, was that you define happiness. Everybody seeks happiness. It's an absolute fact. You ask anybody, take a Gallup poll, do you want to be happy? Yeah, I want to be happy. If you don't want to be happy, you're mentally ill, right? So, and you define happiness as pleasure in the absence of pain, and you can prove that through the data, because everybody, it's presupposed. Everybody seeks happiness, they avoid unhappiness, and that's just a fact. So, Jeremy Bentham claimed that people can define pleasure in the absence of pain in any way they like, as long as they don't harm other people or prevent them from seeking their own happiness, okay? It's important because just keep that in mind. And then John Stuart Mill disagreed with that. He said there actually are higher pleasures and lower pleasures. And the pleasures of the intellect and empathy with other people and the arts are higher pleasures. And it's been proven, because people exposed to both will always choose the higher ones. And it just so happens that he was raised to prefer the higher ones. And so people like him should decide, right? They get to decide how to structure the society so that people actually achieve truly higher pleasures. Well, and so the modern paradigm, you're supposed to maximize freedom and equality. The freedom to live as you like, and so long as you don't harm others. Equality, here's the problem. In order for everyone to flourish, they have to have equal opportunities, so they have to have public education, public health care, public transportation. In order to have Mill said, in order to have a flourishing society, children have to be conditioned to love the higher pleasures. So the parents have to prove they can provide economically for children, and they're conditioning them. And Mill thought, if they're not, if you want a free and open society of mature adults, it's okay to take a kid out of their house and put them in another house because it's all about conditioning. It's not about biological origin, it's how you get conditioned. So that's a problem people didn't necessarily think in order to have a free and open society, the government's gonna take away my kid, right? But it makes sense to him. Okay, the other thing was, in order to provide equal opportunity, you have to pay taxes, right? And so you have to have lots of government intervention, and it has to be through taxation. So some people like Bentham, I'm free to do whatever I want, right? Taxing is stealing my money. The government is, forcing me to do this. This is not freedom. So that was another big argument, is taxing for public services anti-freedom, or is it actually the only way to encourage equality, equal flourishing? Does everybody understand that? I mean, there's a big gap between freedom and equality. That was a huge debate at the time. Okay, now here's what's happened in the US today. In the social sciences, freedom to live as you like has won out over any claims for higher and lower pleasures, right? Mr. Trump would not want to hear about higher and lower pleasures, So greed is good, even in the US. Greed is good because it motivates people. You do need to understand this, because it's driving our society. Yeah, in the US, the way you maximize freedom is to have the least taxes. We are close to the bottom compared to other developing nations in education, healthcare, transportation. It's because of our ideology, right? Our basic belief system, our political ideology. We also have a high percent of social scientists, okay? So now you have all these people that are trained in these disciplines. They know the tools of behavior modification. What are they hired to do? To work for corporations and advertising companies and politicians. So what they are conditioning people for now is to convince people to buy the company product and to create a company where the employees accept what the boss says, just to make everybody happy. So all this advertising, all the social science, is molding people to get caught up in some brand, right? I identify with a brand, like my company, this particular kind of dress, I'm a Gap girl or something like that. So it's just feeding greed, right? It's feeding a consumer society, and it makes people resent paying taxes. All right, and the goal, and then the ones who work for politicians, are using all of their social science techniques to convince people to vote for a political candidate. So we create a political brand, and the consumer buys the brand instead of looking at the policy and asking, do they really develop a strong and stable middle class? Okay, so the use of social science by politicians undermines democracy, okay? So a lot of the social sciences today are getting paid by organizations that they're using their skills in ways that undermine democracy. So voters vote on the basis of advertising. Elections are won a few weeks before people vote. The candidate with the most money wins because they have the most advertising. Advertising appeals to fears and fantasies, not to the citizens' ability to create a stable middle class, which will enable them to flourish. So, the richest Americans pay the most for their campaigns. The winners make laws that make them richer. So, we go from democracy and free speech to oligarchy and the rich controlling society, to a decline in the middle class and a decline in democracy. I hope you understand that it started out with one set of, assumptions, values, and now all those skills are being used for something that's undermining democracy. Okay, the military uses of the social sciences is also undermining democracy and promoting empire building. And this is a reference from Chris Hedges' book, The Illusion of Empire. I do want to have a few citations, so, there is that for what I'm saying. The trained psychologists are used, their skills, to teach brainwashing techniques, right? And originally they taught American soldiers who liked to capture so that they would avoid breaking down and they would save our democracy. But then it started getting used by the American military for torturing our own enemies, right? I don't know if you know about Guantanamo Bay, but we start torturing and we use our social sciences for us to become undemocratic, right? And empire builders. So all of a sudden the same skill is completely reversed. And it's in the claim to protect American democracy, but it's also used to turn America into an authoritarian state. All right. All education, so my conclusion is all education includes values. There's no detached observers and no objective truth. So the next thing we look at, I looked at the social sciences, so now we look at the STEM disciplines, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. So there's this assumption that it promotes human flourishing. The more STEM, the better. That it drives programs, there's more jobs, there's more technology, there's more knowledge. And the question is, will STEM save the world? And I do have to say that I taught in Bangladesh for a couple years. And the students were from 18 different countries in Southeast Asia. They were very bright. But they said in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in all these countries, they keep pushing STEM and they don't teach the humanities. And they love the classes that I was teaching because it was about values. Like, what do you do with STEM? And so it was nice because they didn't even know there was humanities stuff that would lead you to critical thinking about stuff. And so I appreciate that. I do not know, I don't think Indonesia has completely, decided STEM will save everybody, but you tell me, I don't know. So there's brilliant STEM economic leaders in the US today, and they have completely different ideas of good and evil. So Bill Gates, who's obviously a STEM genius, he wrote a book, Getting to Zero. We must get to zero carbon emissions, and we even at this point have to suck carbon out of the air, or we will destroy that planet. He's got all the data. But there's another billionaire who has a BA from MIT in engineering, Mr. Gould, and he's a billionaire based on fossil fuels. And he is running a political machine in the US where billions of dollars are given to political campaigns to protect the fossil fuel industry, to give them tax breaks, and no environmental laws. And our Supreme Court is declaring environmental laws unconstitutional. And the whole promotion of the justice that we have now was promoted by Charles Koch and his political machine. So, it's very ironic. The US has the most climate scientists, and it has the most climate deniers. Doesn't that confuse you? That, Mr. Trump can get votes for calling climate change a hoax. I don't think there's any other political leader who says that outright because they wouldn't get votes for it. Only in the US. And the US has the most climate change scientists, right? And the best technology. How does that happen? That's what I'm saying. STEM is not going to save the world. I'm sorry. And I don't know if you have all realized that. All I want to tell people is patterns that are all around them. They just might not have ever put it in a system and realized they're all connected. Anyway, so Jeff Bezos, Amazon, destroy the competition. He has terrible working conditions for his employees. He's really very authoritarian. He's not the kind of employer that really encourages the development of the employees. He's just obsessed with profits. And he has this company for rocket ship vacations for billionaires. And the carbon emissions are unbelievable, right? He's just I cannot believe what these people think, that they're not going to be affected. It's just very strange. And then Mark Zuckerberg, social media, he refuses to regulate it, right? But the algorithms are designed to confirm people's prejudices. They polarize people. They're destroying democracy in the name of free speech. Everybody understand that? You probably figured that out. Okay, so we have a need for values education. The social sciences are not going to save us. They don't teach us values. And the natural sciences are not going to save us. They don't teach us values. So where do we look for some kind of values? Universal values, right? Is there any way to look at the human condition as if it's not all relative? Because obviously we're losing our democracy, so something is not relative, right? Okay. All right. So humanities and cultural studies. Do these disciplines teach natural universal values? If so, what do they teach and how do they teach it? If not, why not? Okay, well, what are the humanities disciplines? And I'm sure I don't have nearly all of them, honestly. You can correct for this. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of free-flowing, but history, literature, language, theology, philosophy, You named history, right? Okay, so I'm sure there's some more I've missed, but anyway. Anthropology, is it a social science or a humanities? It depends on how it's studied. Is it studied that it's a blank slate and people are molded, or is it studied that there are these patterns and that every indigenous society and every society has certain similarities, right? Okay, that would be more of a cultural anthropology, more of a humanities. And politics, another big controversy. The difference between politics as a social science or politics as a humanities discipline. And you study political philosophy, that's what I study, or political science, and it's completely different. The methodology is completely different. The assumptions are different. So, in the US, and this is where I don't know if it happens elsewhere, and that's why I like to engage. I don't like to tell Indonesians anything about their culture. They tell me, I just tell you what I know that might be helpful. And then we can collaborate. But anyway. So, political science versus political philosophy. The consequences for preserving democracy. This is my experience. That political science is obsessed with polling and associations between groups and how they vote. So African Americans vote Democrats, and uneducated white men vote Republican. It's awful because the first principle of social science is that correlation is not causation. Have you ever taken it? That's like the fundamental. And here they are, constantly correlating. You never ask people, why do you vote this way? You never ask, you just look at the behavior. It's exactly a violation of the first principle of political science and social science. But what happens is it polarizes, right? That's why so many white people don't want non-white people to vote, because they know they're going to vote Democrat and I'm going to lose because the political scientists have told me this. So political science is destroying political community. It's destroying our relationship to each other. And it's going to lead to authoritarianism, and they would never admit that. But it's true, it's common sense. I hope you understand that. It's just a major player in polarization. You never ask, when you take a poll, why don't you ask people, which candidates do you think will promote a stable middle class and preserve democracy? Oh, you're not supposed to ask that because that has values in it, like you value democracy. Well, there are people in Trump world who have decided against democracy. They don't want democracy. Viktor Orban in Hungary. All right, so how did that happen? Right? Okay. So in political philosophy, Aristotle, that was the one I studied, but it's a general approach of political philosophy, is that the goal of political leadership is statecraft. What is it that a statesperson can do? Someone with statecraft, they can make laws, apply laws, explain to the public why one is better, and persuade the public to agree. Everything they do aims to weave together the rich and the poor to create a strong and stable middle class. It structures things so that the citizens become informed and engaged in social and political life. And they want to develop and preserve a middle class. They understand that nobody flourishes unless everybody flourishes, and they try to learn how to think that way. A good ruler is transparent about their motives and their reasons for making a decision. They're accountable to the public. They don't treat the public like stupid animals, right, to control their behavior. They treat them like rational beings who are capable of thinking. Political philosophy assumes our common humanity, and therefore we have a common goal of political life, which is the flourishing of people. There's no split between personal, social, and political well-being. There's, when there's no middle class, there's animosity between the rich and the poor. There's instability. The poor rebel, the rich take control even more, and it leads to authoritarianism. This is what happened in the Greek city-states, and that's why Solon created a constitution for Athens that wove together the rich and the poor. That's what he was considered a great statesman. These patterns are based on world history. And today, the United Nations capabilities approach to human development has this Aristotelian foundation. And that's my main source for that is Martha Nussbaum's book, Women in Human Development, the Capabilities Approach. But there's a whole branch of political philosophy on capabilities. Okay, so what the humanities is based on is the power of ideas in human life, history, and culture. You cannot mold people. You can't mold their behavior without recognizing that their ideas are driving their behavior. So you have to focus on their minds, their ideas about good and evil. You actually have to talk to people. What do you think justice is, right? Then you'll understand the behavior. And if you think the behavior is bad, you have to change people's minds, right? I mean, it's such common sense that you wonder, doesn't everyone think that? It's like, no. In the Enlightenment, they did not think that. They thought they could re-engineer people just by looking at behavior and creating conditions, external conditions, that would be positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and people would be like herd animals and become good. And that's not the ancient view. And I don't think it's common sense. Like, look at what we've got with that. Anyway, so the humanities, history, literature, theology, philosophy, language. And it talks about how ideas lead to economic systems, how ideas lead to how the social science and sciences are used, what people with those skills are paid to do. So the ancients also recognized patterns of good and evil, what works and what doesn't. And so we can gain wisdom from the past. We always have to adapt it to the present, but there are insights from the past because there's some basic foundations that never go away. The psyche is not a blank slate. We can't re-engineer it. We can just recognize what are the dangers that have always been there that the wisdom tradition reminds us of, and then match your situation to make sure to avoid those worst mistakes. Okay, so if you take, here's what often happens, and I think maybe all of you are stuck on this, that the modern paradigm, when you take the modern paradigm and apply it to humanities, the goal is social engineering, and there's a rejection of any sort of human nature that persists over time, right? So if you take the humanities and try and stuff them into modern categories, what do you get? Well, history all of a sudden is gathering more facts, describing more events. You can't make analogies between the past and the present because we're going to have an entirely new future. So, you know, you could use the past to say, see how primitive we used to be? Never going to do that again. There's no analogies. There's nothing like, that's about me. Oh no, that's about it. All right. And if you can already tell that the U.S. in the name of that is completely making all the mistakes. Anyway, so Kant's rationalism. Rationalism in the Enlightenment was you develop this set of concepts and you superimpose them onto yourself and everybody around you. So you create a moral law, and then you conform all your actions to following the moral law. And you can restructure humanity to act according to this modern view of reason. The Western story history, the way they tell it is that it's always about progress. We're leading to more and more progress and enlightenment. Okay, the trouble is, these leaders were also sexist, racist, and had a Western superiority complex, which they carried with them to justify colonialism, right? And the domination of Western countries. And you could say, well, maybe they had good intentions or reasons, but they actually behaved in a very authoritarian, undemocratic, anti-democratic ways, right? Okay, so, all right, so the postmodern period, right? So, postmodern scholars, Western scholars, expose, that the Enlightenment was not a detached observer. The trouble with postmodern is that the language is so complicated. I'm not an expert in this. I really haven't read that much, so if people want to correct me, but I had a student who gave me an article that had, first of all, 15 types of postmodern, right? They're all branched off, and they have a different idea. Like one of them just focuses on the black marks on white paper, right? How to read this stuff in front of you. And then some of them focus on some other aspect of the psyche that you can actually change, but it's all really has a lot of the same assumptions of the West. And it's so esoteric, so elitist. There's only a very small group of very privileged, mostly Western, mostly white people who can get engaged in this conversation and could actually care less. Everybody else is just making the same old mistakes and not learning anything from this new paradigm. Okay. All right. So yeah, the postmodern scholarship, the language is difficult to read and difficult to follow. Only privileged people get in on the conversation, so it's undemocratic and it's elitist once again. It assumes that only the initiated can lead the culture forward, and it assumes that cutting-edge scholarship is engineering the human psyche. This time we're going to get it right, right? Well, then that got exposed as racist, sexist, elitist, and then it disregards the developing nations' true insights, like what can developing nations really offer? Like they know something that you guys don't know, you should maybe listen to. But that's not the assumption, right? The deconstruction is deconstruction. Oh, that was wrong, but now you have to follow Westerners in this, right? Okay. All right, so systems thinking, the need for a new paradigm. That nature is not a blank slate for us to manipulate. And we need to create cultures that are integrated with nature. We're all going to die, right? We need to combine engineering aimed at creating a society that's integrated with nature. A culture that promotes moderation, sustainable living, and an image of Mother Nature as a power to be loved and honored, not as a blank slate to be manipulated. Okay? Then we need to recognize that our survival instincts, our deep-seated sex drive, which exists because we have to reproduce, and our deep-seated aggression, which is caused by vulnerability. Our awareness of vulnerability, those are not going to go away. The human psyche is not a blank slate. We can't condition people out of those basic survival drives. Okay, so systems thinking is a new idea of the good life and the place of humanities in education. So you incorporate what's best from the ancients and moderns and create a new paradigm that acknowledges those aspects of human nature, the human condition, and the human culture that never go away. You the ancient view of the intellectual life is the life of the mind, not the modern view of reason. So this gets completely lost in translation. The ancient view of the mind is not the modern view of reason, and often gets translated as reason. It's not the same thing. Alfred North Whitehead distinguishes between two kinds of reason in his Function and Reason book. One is reason about the ends, the idea of the good, and the other one is strategic, how to achieve that goal. Okay, they're totally different. So we have to change our idea of human reasoning, and we have to change education. We have to see the mind. Education of the mind is the goal, and the mind is a microcosm in the macrocosm. So we have to keep everything in perspective. We have to learn from the past. We have to learn about what mistakes people made in the past, and what successes, and why. What's the pattern? So we can learn from the past and apply it to the present. Okay, so the mind has this capacity for pattern recognition. It's the product of evolution. So the brain developed through more complex interactions with the natural world and developing of more complex social groups. And Aristotle says of it, he's not the only one. I mean, there are a lot of contemporary people, evolutionary psychology and all this. It's just that they keep thinking it's brand new. It's not. That's what annoys me so much. It's very ignorant about the insights from the past, literally, to ignore, right? Okay, so Carl Jung studied the world's mythological traditions. So he lived in Switzerland in the mid-20th century, and he saw that the Germans were STEM wizards, right? You have to be really smart to set up a Holocaust and kill 6 million people. Like, you get your trains on time, you got to make sure you got your gas supplies, and you got to figure out what to do with the bodies. And, I mean, they were really good at STEM, but something went wrong, right? And so Carl Jung said, wait a second, those myths are trying to educate us for these very deep-rooted drives, fear and pleasure. And so Hitler definitely appealed to that. And he even justified the Holocaust by saying, okay, we've got to have the best techies in the future to run the society. And so we've got to breed Aryans and kill off anybody that isn't in order to have a flourishing society in this high-tech world. I mean, honestly, all right, it is amazing to read his arguments because they're scary and they're not irrelevant. We have to be aware of our capacity to really go dark. All right, recognize our capacity for aggression. What fear and fantasies, the fantasy of, a future where humans are running everything and it's great, right? So we have to really watch out about our fantasies and our fears, because they can really go off the rails. But that, ancient myths are about that, and study history is about that. So we have a storehouse of what educational, we have access to a lot of educational resources if we just think we can actually get educated from them. All right, so we have to take this aggression, instead of a passion for security, it's a passion for justice. It's a passion to create a good society. Okay, so what I call the perspective of the Greeks, which I think is not just uniquely Greek at all, it's an ancient perspective, is that we are spiritual beings by nature. And by spiritual, you mean we're wired to care about, to live for the sake of something greater than ourselves, some sense of meaning and purpose. And the 12 deities all represent 12 different sacred passions. Athena is wisdom and justice. Zeus is justice. Apollo is truth and science. And he creates cities. But his twin sister is the wilderness, right? Wilderness protection. Honor. Hera represents how people add to what the requirements of a job are, and they come together for a better quality of life. So they do things that you honor, like on an honor day. You honor employees that went over and above what their job description was. And so that's important to do things that promote a high quality of social life. And then Aries received honor in war. Aphrodite was the goddess of beauty, but she was married to Hephaestus, the god of the craft. So all that meant was that you appreciate visual, sensual stimulation, but it's all connected to the mind and to craftsmanship. So mind and body are always connected. And that's how you get to a higher level of culture. Dionysus was the wild child, and he is the god of tragedy. And he dies and is reborn, because in tragedy, he magnifies these very irrational passions that we're capable of. So people are reminded that, oh my God, I understand why Clytemnestra stabbed her husband to death. It's like, I don't want to understand that, you know? And what it is, it's about how it's psychological wounding, right? How a wife can destroy a marriage, psychologically. So anyway, tragedy is about all that stuff that we often repress, deny, like I'm not capable, blah, blah, and then flush it out. And you see somebody living out in revenge fantasies or whatever, and you go, oh my God, I gotta get over revenge. I gotta get over even wanting that. I gotta find something creative, some way to move forward. So that's Dionysus is the god of the theater, and he dies and he's reborn. So the educational system is purgation. You purge yourself, you flush it out, and then you move forward. Okay, so then there's Poseidon and Demeter, are these natural forces. And do not undermine Demeter, the goddess of fertility, or she'll starve you out, which is exactly what we're doing. Do not ignore Poseidon, the god of the sea, and the god of the winds, and the god of fresh water, because you're going to get slapped for it, right? Just like Florida just did this week, right? So mythologic is nuts, it's because of our arrogance. And Poseidon is coming back, right? We didn't honor him. So it's just a mythological story. It's personifying actually our situation. And we didn't learn any of those lessons. The Hades is what sort of legacy, what sort of story do you want to leave behind for others to tell about you and your life? Like you should care about the legacy that you leave behind. And then Persephone is, if you sought money and power, you had to make victims of other people. They were your tools. Well, she was a victim, and you're going to have a comeuppance from her. She's going to victimize you for eternity. So think twice, right? And then Hestia is the one who sits back and reflects on all these patterns, right? It's our capacity for reflection that causes people to write these myths because they, oh my God, they understand the pattern. And so then she is at the hearth at home. And this is when you're talking at home about life, you're developing your mind, your capacity to think about good and evil. And then the torch, Hermes, takes that light from the flame at home and carries it into the world. So you carry those insights that you got at home around the hearth into the world and you act. So it's important how kids get habituated, because whether it's good or bad, they're going to take it out into the world and they're going to help, or they're going to hurt based on what they have at home. So what happens is that the stories of the deities are what happens when people become obsessed and they can only focus on one thing. And they don't compromise, and they don't recognize that all of these things are important, and they all have to work together. Okay? All right, so an example. I mean, right? I've written so much stuff, but that's okay. The only thing I want to convince you ultimately is the value of consciousness and the value of your culture. So that's what I'm getting at. So examples of today. Apollo is the god of reason, and that means the modern view of reason. God, he was the god of reason as opposed to wisdom and as opposed to justice. He was actually emotionally immature. He chased nymphs, which are women he just loved for their bodies, not any respect. And then if they rejected him, he took revenge. He was indifferent to justice. He changed sides in the Trojan War because the side with the just cause was internally conflicted and chaotic. But the side with the unjust cause was very well organized and efficient, so he moved over there. Well, what's the analogy? Is that we honor these people who are really good at running businesses, right? Like Zuckerberg and Bezos and Murdoch, but they follow the same pattern, right? Like a lot of those guys end up trading in their wife for a new model every 10 to 15 years, like marrying a very young woman every 10 or 15 years. And so toward the end of their life, they're marrying women like 40 years younger than them. But those women have kids that would get some of that power and money, so the kids are all fighting about who gets it. Rupert Murdoch has 2 families, and they just fight and fight. It happens a lot. Okay, and then it's obvious that these people are indifferent to justice, like Fox News. He doesn't care that he's corrupting the judgment, destroying democracies. He's just running a very successful company. He's making a lot of money. And there's people who will even say, yeah, he is the good. Really, there's Americans that will say he is the epitome of what everybody wants and what they shouldn't want, because it's not hurting anybody else. We're back to Bentham. You're free to live as you like, as long as you don't hurt anybody else. Mr. Fox News doesn't hurt anybody, like you choose whether to watch it or not. Not my problem, free speech. And we're destroying democracy. All right, so the Oracle at Delphi was dedicated to Apollo. This is in the Greek. But if you look at the story behind it, it is really structured to not let Apollo loose, right? So at a certain point, wisdom thinkers knew that we're going to make this switch from cultures that are mostly focused on natural cycles. And the power of Apollo is going to drive us so that every generation is different. It's more complex because of technology and science. So Apollo is going to run human history. And so he kills the snake that protects the goddess. But now the goddess is going to be protected by reason, right? And so Apollo has to listen to Athena. He has to make his judgments based on wisdom and justice. And so there's this presence there of all these other gods to make sure Apollo stays in check and he doesn't end up going off the rails. And so many of the stories in Greek mythology are what happens when men don't, when they go to an extreme. It's trying to stop, mostly men, but Apollonian thinking, from causing all these problems. So the history of the myths, the history of the founding, it was businessmen who came from Crete, which was a matriarchal, a female-oriented society that you bring here, and they're the ones that'll have the wisdom about how to manage Apollo. Anyway, it's an amazing site. It's about the transition to the rule of reason. It's about the transition to political community. It really is very amazing. But here's another story that I think is what I call archetypal. It's true of every society. Is every college student has to decide who to give the golden apple to. The golden apple is your passion. What is it that you're living for? What is it that you're going to sacrifice everything else to have because you care about it most? You're living for the sake of something greater than yourself. You decide, this is the thing that I think I can do, that I want to do, that I can help other people. So he has three choices. Based on the human condition, it's never going to change. Aphrodite, if you give it to me, pleasure and wealth, I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, she happened to be married and started the Trojan War. So the message is, don't dedicate yourself to pleasure and wealth. Pride and thought, because he had the gold in the richest city, he could buy off the opponents and be peaceful just through money. And he couldn't. The city was completely demolished. So don't believe them. Getting wealthier makes you more secure. The next one is Hera. If you give it to me, I'll give you power and glory. And that was the Federation of Achaeans, the ones on the other side. They didn't care about justice. They cared about power. And they destroyed themselves and created a whole lot of havoc. They ultimately won because they had a just cause, but nobody would think the world was safer because of them, because they were very brutal. So you didn't solve any problems. War solved nothing. Everybody was wrong, right? And so the third choice is Athena. If you give it to me, you dedicate your talents to promoting the middle class, preventing war, preventing animosity. And so the message is, every young person has to make that decision, and the stories are trying to get you to see justice in wisdom. So Plato's Dialogues is one example. He was born right at the end of the golden age of Athens. Athens was the most democratic society anybody ever heard of. Within 30 years, they had destroyed their democracy and they elected an authoritarian leader in the name of the good old days of blind loyalty to family, traditional religion, and patriotism, which is exactly the opposite of the kind of society that Athens was. Athens was designed to promote critical thinking, not blinded obedience. But people believed in it and they elected a dictator. So Plato's message is, here's how we lost our democracy. You can lose it in 20 years, 30, in one generation. College students, you can lose your democracy by the time you're middle-aged. Don't do this. Here's how we corrupted the economy. Here's how we corrupted the military. Here's how we corrupted education. Here's how we corrupted the court system. Here's how we corrupted this. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because it's inevitable. Don't think you can get away with it. If you're privileged enough to read Plato's Dialogues, you have naturally motivation and privilege. Use it for the well-being, or you're going to lose it, right? You'll leave behind a terrible legacy for your children. And don't believe you won't, right? Don't delude yourself. So, education for Aristotle's virtues and how they apply today. So Aristotle says, so these stories are also trying to educate people to exercise these virtues and not to go to an extreme. So I'm just going to give you a quick list of those virtues. Temperance is self-control in relation to eating, drinking, and sex. That's always been true, right? Courage is facing situations of fear. Sometimes, and not too much or too little. So there's national security, personal security, right? The military and the police. But there's also fear of failing in the economic system, fear of social ostracism, fear of pain, aging, and death. And people can have excess fears and destroy their society because of those fears. In my country, the fear of death among old people is sucking up so much money so that children don't have education, don't have health care, just because of this obsessive fear of death and the hurting adults. Annoying. And then generosity, living moderately and giving your extra to help other people. And promote the middle class and trust and goodwill between citizens. Really important. Magnanimity is where rich people give lots of money away in a way that promotes flourishing. Ambition. Find your deepest sacred passion, get the credentials, get the authority, and use it to benefit people over whom you have it. Honor. Go beyond just your job description. Engage in community development that improves the quality of life. Sociability. Ignore small injustices for the sake of unity. Self-knowledge. Avoid arrogance. Avoid thinking you know more than you know. Or being too self-deprecating. Thinking you know less. Like, make your contribution. Be fair. The political virtues are the relations we have with people we don't know personally. We live under a common body of laws. So you have to think about this. It's not going to be based on an experience. It's going to be based on patterns and the broader system. So the economic system needs to be regulated, or else the rich will get richer, or poorer, one end of the class. You are able to, people need to have the character trait. They have to want to live moderately. They're going to find a way to use the system to get richer or more powerful. So, children, you have to educate children in your household to love moderation and to not want more than they need. Because you either promote greed or moderation based on how you raise your kid. It's really important. Parents, your political duty, you have a political duty to raise your children with their virtues, so that they can leave home and exercise those character traits. Take them with as they engage in public affairs and make decisions. It's important, right? You don't just all of a sudden become an adult and you're really good at being a citizen. Not so. The political virtues, legislation, the art of making good laws, the art of distributing social goods. People are unequal. Give citizens what they need to flourish. And that's different for different people. Not everybody needs to be given a free PhD education, right? They don't want it, and they're not going to be able to take advantage of it. So you figure out who needs what in order to flourish. Some people would need to go to technical school. Some people, it's common sense, really. But you have to do that scary thing of noticing that people are unequal. No, it doesn't mean you use the inequality to abuse people. You use the inequality to figure out how to help people flourish. When you're rectifying wrong and people break the laws, then everybody should be treated equal. The rich shouldn't be able to hire an expensive lawyer to get off, right? When you do wrong, everybody should be treated equally. Equity is how you apply the laws to a particular case, and that's what judges do and juries do. And it should be based on the facts and reasonable inferences and judgment. So practical wisdom is the synthesis of all this stuff. So that when you're making a decision on a particular day on a particular subject, and you make decisions probably all day, 30 a day, you're always making decisions. And you have the ability to figure out, well, what are your real options? What alternatives do you have that are really better? Which one's better and why? And then you can speak to the public and convince them to agree with you. It's hard. And Greek texts are about decisions. Decisions are about people arguing about what's the best thing to do. People have different reasons, they have different. But when you're reading those stories, you're figuring out in your mind. You're learning how to do it in your own situation. It's all about analogies. Practical wisdom is very difficult, and it requires all the virtues. There's no ideology. There's no recipe for what's best. It's just a way of life. People have good intentions and good principles, but when they apply it, they misapply based on their character. Leadership, you create a society that's structured in a way that promotes flourishing. And that would be decentralized, right? That people can actually take care of themselves and each other. So you don't need an authoritarian leader to maintain unity, right? The people can maintain their own unity and social coherence. Okay, but Aristotle has been used to justify Western domination, right? Westerners will come in and say, we have practicalism and you don't by nature. Plus, we just have to get the education, so we're definitely the best. And that's not true. And Aristotle was sexist, racist. His work was used to justify slavery, tons of stuff, right? But you don't have to reject the whole theory. But you do have to point out any theory, any set of words can be corrupted. And just say it right up front. The world's religious traditions, this is where we're coming to Panchathula, I'm actually getting there. The icons, the moral icons of the traditions, particularly those mentioned in Panchathula, all exercise the virtues, and they live lives driven by their minds, their ideas of good. History has shown that can be corrupted. All these traditions can be corrupted. But when people live examined lives and they keep those models in mind, they actually can achieve a higher level of flourishing. So the model provides explanations for character flaws, why people make bad decisions, what aspect of human nature and culture is easily corrupted, or weak. People are weak or they're ignorant, and that's why they make their own decisions. So another part of colonialism was this condemnation of religion. So first of all, Hinduism, Buddhism were not religions. They were ways of life, an ergon, which is exactly what Aristotle said. Virtue is not a logos. It's not a definition or an ideology. It's an ergon, a way of life. It's incarnated. It's the way you live. And sometimes you think you're living on a principle, but you're ignorant, or you misapply it, right? So virtue is not living on principles, it's actually having good judgment over time. So the claim by the Westerners, first of all, they labeled all these things religions, and then they said, oh, and they're anti-scientific, and they're anti-progress, and they're stuck in the past. That's why we're superior, right? In our religion, Christianity justifies exploitation of nature for human well-being, so that justifies the fact that we probably steal all your resources. Okay, and so, so I think we can bring back the classical virtues and apply them today. So, the icons of the best life. So if you examine these life stories of these people, first of all, some of the stories are not historical, they're mythologized. You take, like Jesus, I happen to know the story of Mary and Martha because my name's Martha, right? And so there's a story that he treated women as equals. They couldn't be his disciples because his disciples roamed around the countryside. You know, single women could not roam around the countryside, right? They get killed. So, but the story is he treated them as equals. And he told Mary, Martha was in the kitchen doing lady women things. He told her to come into the living room and talk about spiritual things. So the story is saying that Jesus treated women as equal spiritually, right? Just a mythology. So you would tell a story about Jesus. This is the kind of person he was in a kind of situation. Right? It doesn't have to necessarily be a historical data point. It's moderns that are obsessed with that. You can't get a lot of the data. You just have to look at it. And then if you think about the stories that of these characters, it's interesting because which stories do people keep remembering? And you can go back to Aristotle's virtues, and that's why people remember them. So they make analogies with their own stories, right? The stories, when you mythologize, you explain the pattern, and then people can make analogies, and then you have a common humanity. Okay, So, Socrates, Jesus, Buddha, Hindu Guru, Confucius, and Muhammad. So I teach my class showing that they all have those same virtues. And all of them are about a way of life. They're not about an ideology. So the dialectical is a dialectical tradition. It's the same foundation, but there's variations, right? Each one is a variation on a theme. And so what we do is we talk about it. We really learn about it by talking about it. Not by saying, oh, this is a principle and you have to do this, or these principles are better. You have a conversation, right? And that's how you really figure out how to integrate these insights into a way of life. And you have a conversation about what am I going to do tomorrow about that? It's like, well, you know, what does wisdom literature teach us about what not to do? And maybe what's better, and maybe think of stories or whatever. But it's always somebody picks a story that might be a reflection of their weakness of character. Somebody else picks a different story. But we just have to keep the conversation going. Another pattern is that the icon themselves was not sexist, racist, or classist. But that comes later, when it gets institutionalized. When you have, you know, the Buddhist institutionalized Buddhism and Hinduism. After Muhammad died, you know, the Sunni and the Shia, that is not all the spirit of Muhammad. Just the way what happens in the history is when they use those texts, they create more texts, they tell stories about Buddha and Jesus that make them sexist and such a lie. Right? They're using it to justify their power. But it happens in every tradition. So Indonesia's contribution to global civilization. So I think that the humanities and cultural studies among Indonesians, that they have a particular thing to offer based on their cultural history. First of all, they're a developing nation, so they can recognize and call out that the Western view was not natural. It was self-interested Western. It was a false view, and it was used to engage in very undemocratic, anti-democratic practices. Okay, the other thing is that Indonesians recognize that the view of God in Pancasila is the same as Aristotle. And studying Aristotle, this is what I like to pronounce, connects that view to this culture and how it was designed to promote citizen engagement in life. So that's where I can do the bridge. The Olympian gods, Zeus is king, so there's a prioritization, right? The gods disagree, but still, political association, Zeus is supposed to be monitoring the other ones, right? And Aristotle thinks of practical wisdom as the highest virtue. Okay, and so my impression as an outsider, right? And I am an outsider, and I'm not telling you Indonesians. But my Indonesian colleagues can educate me, and we can collaborate. My impression is the founders who wrote Pancasila were very aware of the Greek view. Like Mr. Stu Carnell, I was educated in the West. He knows all this stuff that I just told you about the moderns and the Greeks, and he just decided on Pancasila. And he said they were starting out with this indigenous, this ancient wisdom. This is exactly the wisdom tradition, right? You check the patterns, make sure you're incorporating these patterns, and then you synthesize them at a higher level, like for the rest of your life. That's what you're always doing. And that's what the Greek tradition does. The Indonesian Pancasila focuses on consensus and conversation. Again, that's very Greek. It doesn't, the ideology is not a set of abstractions. It's actually about a way of life and an incarnation of a way of life. Let's see. What's the first word on the sentence? Begins with the wisdom of the ancestors. What is that first word? Explicitly. Okay. So the Pancasila explicitly talks about the wisdom of the ancestors and formulates it into something that is passing down without getting stuck in the past, right? But you're acknowledging. We're not going to forget that wisdom. So the God is pluralistic, it's a way of life, it's not a system of words. You're not supposed to accept it blindly. You're not supposed to listen to politicians who claim that they have God's will, right, in a certain religion, because that's not the way Indonesians are supposed to think that any one person or any one religion has more of an insight than another one. So the cultural values are the spiritual values, living for the sake of something greater than yourself. That's definitely embedded in conscious love. The worst evil is arrogance, overstepping your bounds, trying to control nature, greed, power hungry. That's all implicit in conscious love. So it has, Pancasila has humanistic values, the basic humanity, the same struggles between good and evil, same temptations. It's based on spiritual humanism. It includes social justice. You use your knowledge and skills and your privilege for the well-being of those who need it. Very, traditional classical virtue. You model the good life. You engage in conversation with people that are less educated. You have unity and diversity. That's one of those 12 gods, right? You're supposed to unify all this stuff. So that sort of process, you avoid polarization. The identity of the nation, this is where John Oates was teaching this, and I realize you have a curriculum, so I am just literally poking at a few possibilities, and you all know way more than I do about this. The character of the people, it's a way of life, right? They say right up, it's a way of life. So that's definitely one of the great things about the ancients that we really need to bring with us. It's the soul of the people, it's the inner life, and it's the social contract. What does the country owe the citizens? Education and healthcare. What do the citizens owe the country, right? To give back. And that's a lot more Greek. That isn't the US. Right? And I can go into that, it doesn't matter. But I mean, just what I've said. You're free to decide whatever you want and to use the system. This is not ancient and it's not conscious. And our view is destroying democracy. Now, there was a study done that one of the students reported that not many citizens know much about conscious. So I think it's the responsibility of college graduates, and I tell this to my graduates in Bezos too about the US Constitution. To go to the villages and ask people what they think of it, right? Just ask. Because you never know, because people talk and talk. Who knows what they say, what they're saying. So just listen and reflect on what they say and try to figure out what questions to ask or what that would move them closer to the kind of commitment that you think is the spirit, the conscious and the soul of Indonesia, right? So don't, discriminate on the basis of religion, care for other people, take pleasure in diversity, in unity and diversity, encouraging dialogue, develop wisdom about public life. So you just, have conversations with people. That's how you actually do it. But you also have to remember, I'm almost done. Yeah, I am almost done. I'm sorry. How every religious tradition can be corrupted. People, power hungry, money hungry people will hide their view under God. And how this has occurred in Indonesia. What's happening is, what can we learn about the mistakes or the successes? How Pancasila can be corrupted, and there's still these controversies about it. But that's okay, it's just controversial. People disagree, just find out what they think. Don't get into a fight about it, right? Just figure out. We have disagreements of the past. What can we learn that can apply today or in the future? There's always complexity and ambiguity. At Lyon College, we have this list of liberally minded qualities: commitment to truth, intellectual honesty, fair to opposing points of view, patience with complexity and ambiguity, tolerance of reason and dissent. And I think that's very much in the spirit of conscious love. So, I know that you have an educational culture where you require religion, conscious and civic education. And as far as I know, it seems as if Florida there's that across the board Jews. Okay, and so I want to find out more about it. My place is I came here to find out more about it, about what you have to say about your cultural tradition. I can bring my expertise, and we can work together and come up with something that would move us all forward, right, in the goal of civilization. Let's see. Democratic Society of Culture, and I think Indonesia has something to offer. Everything is at stake. Everything that makes life worth living. The free exercise of our higher order capacities. Free scientific inquiry, free artistic expression, freedom to speak your opinions in public, to listen and hold each other accountable, freedom of association, to seek a higher quality of life. Right? You don't want to give that up. Don't assume it, but don't give it up. So traditional humanities has described these and provides a vision. The artists, everybody, that's what the humanities has done traditionally. And preserving democracy in Indonesia is consistent with that. Socrates as a whole. So the conclusion finally. So I will encourage you as you move forward into this precarious situation. And I'm looking for collaboration. And I have to thank Joe and the faculty of literature and cultural studies for inviting me. And I hope we can move forward. Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, Professor Beck, for the presentation. It was a very long presentation, sekitar 1 jam ya. Mungkin I switch to bahasa ya. Monggo kalau ada pertanyaan untuk Profesor Beck. Ya. Ini sudah di kolom chat ada ya di Zoom. Mungkin saya bisa bacakan aja, ini sudah dalam bahasa Inggris. Ya. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the presentation. As Professor Nata mentioned, how the middle and high income classes have extremely high role in supporting the candidates during the campaign to maintain their status quo. So, based on your opinion, is democracy we have today, particularly in the US, only favor the middle and high income classes?
Yeah, we have an oligarchy. We rule the rich. It doesn't even favor the middle anymore. People in the top 1%. Americans really don't know how unequal things are. Like if you look at a chart, it's like here's everybody and here's the 1%. They're just, you can't make a chart big enough. And then it gets really bad when they pay for campaigns that increase their wealth even more. So my answer is that even the middle class are struggling. They don't even have control over the political process.
Thank you ya buat ini for the question. Tadi saya dapat titipan pertanyaan dari Pak Beck. So tadi di he has question to you. He asked, to what extent the role of middle class in Indonesia, the middle class is increasing, and so far it helps the democratization of Indonesia. So yeah, to what extent the role of middle class?
Actually, it's really important. Whether the middle class is increasing or decreasing is more important than the actual standard of living that is middle class. Okay? Because if Indonesia is moving toward a stronger middle class, people have hope, right? They have hope of getting into the middle class. They probably have a wealthy class that probably wants this to happen. That's what maintains stability. Okay, so in the U.S., the standard of life is high, but it's going down, and people are afraid, and they don't have hope. A lot of people are hopeless. They have no idea of what kind of job they can get that could get them the same income as their father, or in this case, their grandfather, who worked in a union and made a whole ton of money. We don't have those anymore. We just have to change our economy. But we have to not give so many people reasons to be completely afraid of the future. And that's what's ruining us, right? Because then an authoritarian guy will say, I'll fix it for you. So the fact that Indonesia's middle class is growing is very good.
Oke, mungkin yang ada di sini ada pertanyaan untuk Profesor Maka. Kalau pakai bahasa Indonesia boleh, nanti saya jelaskan. Ada apa? Ayo.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Beck, for your excellent presentation. We understand well from your presentation that there is a linkage of big ideas from the Greek philosophy to modern one regarding humanities, morality, spirituality, until democracy. And I'm happy because you also mentioned Pancasila and its values, which is you acknowledge as rich. And I'm thinking in the future, this Pancasila, which has also a deep philosophical foundation, which is also the cultural heritage of Indonesian ancestors, and it contains also the ideal of Indonesia in the future, become an alternative. If democracy is not promising something, right? Yeah, it was very ideal when the Greek philosophers formulated democracy. But on the way to modern time, democracy is decreased, not to say corrupted, right? Step by step, and we know that democracy fall on the way to the modern period. Also, as you said, in America, democracy is decreasing now. The concept is there, very, very ideal, but the reality, again, democracy is dependent on who are ruling the country, right? And we see that the trend of the democracy is decreasing because of the authority. They misbuying the democracy in their regime, right? I'm thinking what do you think? Do you think that Pancasila, with its values, can be an alternative for democracy in the future? This is my question. Thank you so much.
Very good question.
I just think the goal is to look at all the cultures and see what their strengths and weaknesses are. When I was sitting in Mr. John's class yesterday, and I know you have a standard curriculum, it's way more compatible with democracy. And the things that we are teaching our people in the U.S. about our Constitution, it's complete oligarchy. It's not democratic at all. It's saying, when we were founded, that it was a minimal government. Government is just military and police. But the founders, the conditions, people came over and they had opportunity, they got a homestead, they got land, they cut down the trees, and they prospered, and there was a middle class. All you really needed was 40 acres in a field to get yourself started, and the government gave that. we have this obsession about no intervention. Like today, in order to be in the middle class, you have to have a college education. Healthcare is way more expensive because it's way more sophisticated. So all of the changes since then all gravitate toward more government involvement in government, more regulation of corporations because they're so huge that it's not going to be democratic unless you regulate. More taxation, inheritance tax. You can't let these people give their children gobs of money and they're totally isolated. That's not a democracy. So there's that. And the other thing I want to mention, when you teach history, you know, there's different ways to teach it, but to me, you teach it for patterns. That's what Thucydides wrote about also the war that killed democracy in his own experience. Don't do this, right? He's teaching for posterity. Right? Okay, American history, you know, quick and dirty, just a few things that when I was in high school kids should have been told. I knew this. It wasn't any, it's a no-brainer, which is after World War II, 1955, the European economy had collapsed. The developing countries were not developing. The U.S. was going to be the economic superpower of the world for a few decades. It was inevitable to make all sorts of mistakes and still be the money bags of the world. But eventually, the developing countries would develop. All the manufacturing jobs would go abroad because they would be cheaper to manufacture product. We do that, right? Europe would develop. So we'd have to compete with very sophisticated high-tech people in Germany, right? It was inevitable. It was just, so you should educate your high school students to be prepared. Don't be afraid. Adjust. And we did not. And that's why we have people who are in the manufacturing class, their grandpas had union jobs and pensions and all this stuff. We had a large middle class for a while because we could lose, but it was going to change. And so the children of these people and the grandchildren should not resent it. They should have to find someone to blame. So then, that's where I think you can teach your history, right? In a way that authentically prepares you for what you have, what's likely to happen, to prevent, right? People from being afraid of things that are going to happen, and just figure out how to maintain the soul of the country. Fairness, quotas, all the things that we already do. But I guess I have to alert you. I think the U.S. is going to get into a war with China. Okay? The head of China is very progressive, and he really wants to create the economic empire of the world. And he's doing everything. I read one book, but that's okay. I mean, it's just everybody is aware of this. The students write about these countries where they have the roads and bridges project or something, that they're buying all these ports, and they have all these pipelines to Africa. I mean, they're just all over it. Well, what is information going to do about that? Right? Just prepare for this. Just anticipate. Are some ambitious politicians going to demonize the Indonesians that have that background, right? Are they communists to kill them free? I just anticipate. And then go to your history, well, what happened in the past? And, there's no, I don't think anybody looks back and says, oh, that's really good for that. Just say, okay, we're going to get caught up in the same kind of ambiguity. But let's not look to leaders who make it cut and dry and they find someone again. Does that make sense? So, I really do think that's the spirit of Pancasila, and it could be an incredible advantage to it at this point. And it could produce to work that possible, right? Increased decline in your democracy. For example, if you think, this I just totally make this up, right? Oh, the Chinese, you know, and so the Islamists, oh, we have to be back to Islam. Like, we gotta be more strict, disciplined. We can't have all this, that's gonna protect us from most bad guys, right? That just anticipate it. And, you know, that's why, again, if you're college educated, you should go listen. If that's what the villagers say, say, okay, well, let's try to think about this way. But you always have to listen. You can't be an educated person who even is going to tell you that it's not true. You have to listen, right? You have to cultivate the assets. There are some intellectual assets, right? We have to together work on an idea of the good, an idea of the purpose. That's what's going to drive you to real people. I'm just saying your general idea is great. Just what people do with it, how they apply it, the decisions they make, the practical things they have. Does that answer your question? Long answer.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. Ada lagi mungkin yang ingin bertanya dari offline ke online? Ya, mungkin apa questions you? You're talking about this value and the virtues that the two virtues from classical virtues, and do you have any suggestion how to make it, how to get students and make them internalize this kind of values? Do you have any strategy?
I think you should just start with your own curriculum, right? John tells me you're required to take religion, Pancasila, and civic education. Okay, well, that's kind of it, right? So then you just, that's what I'd be curious to know, like, what is that mandated curriculum? And then I could just say, oh, that is very consistent with this. And the reason, but I don't have any better tools. I can tell you, it really scares me when kids in the US are being told it's not democratic. We're going to lose our democracy. In principle, I mean,
Even in principle.
oh my gosh, yeah, it's amazing. I guess I'll give you one example. People don't mind, but environmental laws. Like, it's obvious that we need to address climate change. Our founding fathers did not have environmental laws. So we have a Supreme Court that wants to go back to the original intent. We are not going to have environmental laws. And California will pass them, and someone will sit and go to the Supreme Court, and they can't have environmental laws. Can you imagine that? In the society with the most kind scientists, because it is a obsession with the past and absolute inability to adjust. And our founding founders wrote a constitution that was the most adjustable and adaptable, and that they said this has to evolve over time. We have a case history kind of judicial system, so what is that? And we are in a constant reactionary mode. An empire that made its money from fossil fuel is not going to give it up, even when it's completely dysfunctional. So, I don't have, why should I be giving you advice because I took office? I can show you what not to do, right? Just like Plato, don't do this, don't do that. Don't tell kids they're free to live in their life, right? And I can tell them why I like the curriculum. And why is more consistent with philosophy? And why ours at the time worked, but not because of the ideology, just because the conditions led to a middle class. But in order to maintain it, now you have to have a lot more laws. We don't get it, like, don't pay attention to us. We're blowing this. But then that would be that you make sure when you teach topics that everybody's clear on it, that it's very, you have to adapt to the situation. You have to respond to what's going on in the conversation. Yeah, ideology.
Okay. Ya, if you kalau tidak ada pertanyaan lagi, here is almost 3:30, so yeah, we can just end it this session. I have some highlights from what Professor talked about, but I'm going to state in my presentation. He said the audience hari ini Profesor Beck sudah menyampaikan presentasinya yang luar biasa ya. Dia mencoba melihat antara biologis dan cultural science dan bagaimana konstitusinya untuk ini ya, social life yang lebih baik. Jadi untuk melihat itu dan untuk melihat bagaimana dia bisa diaplikasikan dalam konteks sekarang, Profesor Marta sudah mencoba mengajak kita ya ke kelas yang melihat teologi dari social science ini. Kemudian Profesor Marta juga memberikan contoh yang mengenai apa yang terjadi pada dari Greek mythology tadi sudah banyak yang dan bagaimana kita harus belajar ini ya learn something dari apa yang pernah terjadi di Greek mythology. Kemudian bagaimana kita melihat banyak konteks yang kaitannya dengan apa yang terjadi di Amerika. Tadi yang saya satunya saya tentang ini ya stand ya yang apa sudah yang apakah dia benar-benar bermanfaat ya, kemudian menangkap pada topiknya virtues ya, teologi dalam pendidikan dan kita juga merupakan faktor yang sangat important, sangat krusial untuk apa untuk sebenarnya ini ya ide tentang humanities ya lebih terus tadi juga yang saya kemarin kita bahas sekolah itu adalah sekolah progres atau tidak juga adalah poin yang baik ya, tapi apakah progresnya ke arah ya, dan kalau saya pastikan dari apa yang disampaikan oleh Profesor Marta ini teorinya ideal ya, cuman kadang di real life-nya itu pelaksanaannya ada apa mungkin yang tidak menjadi penjelasan dan ini kalau kita perhatikan juga mungkin kita juga share ya value yang sama dengan apa yang terjadi di Palestina ini, mungkin isu apa dalam Islam ternyata juga berjalan berbarengan ya, makanya proses juga menarik tertarik ya dengan terutama ideologi kita istilah dan bagaimana itu bisa memiliki potensi ya sebenarnya untuk dikembangkan dalam bidang ini. Oke, menurut saya sekian yang bisa kita sampaikan hari ini, dan terima kasih ya, thanks again Profesor Marta for the presentation. There are many knowledge that students and especially when you talk about the and how you related dengan technology. It's interesting dan mungkin and at the end of your presentation and you also try to relate education context is very valuable for us. Okay,
I do want to say that all the people that are out there online, I was the kind of person that didn't ask the question in public, but I would go to the professor in his office, right, and talk to him one-on-one. So I actually was staying in the guest house. I don't know whoever's on campus. I don't remember one. But during the day, I understand I'm off this year, so I really like to talk to people. And I like to talk about anything, but if you can, if you want to talk about this presentation, I think we really learn through conversation, because that's what reveals our character. Anybody can hide behind some words, but I have to talk about stuff.
Ya, ini jadi untuk semuanya juga ya, Profesor Mata juga terbuka ya, kalau ada yang mau diskusi lebih lanjut, beliau ada waktu ya.
October 29th. Oh, actually, I did a share one on the 23rd. So. 22, so.
Ya, Profesor Mata akan di sini sampai Oktober 22. Kalau ada yang mau diskusi, silakan mungkin hubungi kita dulu ya, nanti kita cek. Oke, ya. Thank you so much untuk partisipan dan untuk yang ada online atau offline di sini dan Profesor Mata. Terima kasih semuanya. Saya akhiri dengan alhamdulillah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.